क्या स्कोप है एक यंग चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट को एंड कोई रेंज बता सकते हो कि ये सैलरी एक्सपेक्ट कर सकते हैं?
We would pay a fresh chartered accountant anywhere between 11 to 12 lakh rupees as a starting salary.
जीसीसी काम करता क्या है?
एक कंपनी ले ली like IBM. अब उसकी ऑडिट करनी है. Why does that person who is doing the audit need to sit in US? You can do the entire audit from here. Everything is possible to be done out here.
कौन से कंट्रीज है जो टैक्स हेवंस है?
Bahamas, British Virgin Islands, Jersey, Guernsey.
अगर कोई एक कंपनी इनकॉर्पोरेट करता है ये कंट्रीज में तो देयर इज नो टैक्स.
No tax at all.
कैसे डिसाइड किया कि खुद का कुछ शुरू करना है फ्रॉम स्क्रैच एंड व्हाट वाज दैट स्टोरी?
As I was thinking about this whole thing, concern that I have is, will the respect that I enjoy go down one bit? My wife Seema, she made a comment which shook me. Assume for a moment that it happens. Do you still want to do it? Because that's the true test that you want to make it happen. And I said, wow. I'm going to accept that some of the biggest businessmen whom I know, they took my call because I was deputy CEO of KPMG. Now they may not. But I still want to do it.
Do you think that we should move to a single rate GST system as well?
It's very attractive to come back and say put only one rate. But medicines deserve a different rate. Car has to have a different rate. Now, if you go back and say that the rate of tax on salt and the tax on liquor, rate should be the same, what are you trying to do?
Do you think that AI will replace the jobs of chartered accountant? वीडियो देखने से पहले मेरी एक रिक्वेस्ट है आप सबसे. मैं YouTube एनालिटिक्स देख रहा था एंड वहां पर देखा कि 82.6% ऑफ माय ऑडियंस हु इज वाचिंग दिस कंटेंट हैज नॉट सब्सक्राइब टू द चैनल. अगर मैंने आपको थोड़ी सी वैल्यू प्रोवाइड की होगी एंड आपको अगर कंटेंट बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है, आई रिक्वेस्ट ऑल ऑफ यू टू प्लीज हिट द सब्सक्राइब बटन सो दैट वी कैन ब्रिंग यू द बेस्ट क्वालिटी ऑफ गेस्ट एंड गिव यू द मैक्सिमम वैल्यू पॉसिबल. थैंक यू सो मच फॉर सब्सक्राइबिंग टू आवर चैनल एंड एंजॉय दिस एंटायर एपिसोड ऑफ कॉन्वर्सेशन विद कुशल. So like since Dua has been into taxation and it's like one of the biggest firms even in like the tax matters and all, a lot of people who are watching this aspire to like let's say have a career in taxation. आप एकदम ऐसे सिंपली ब्रेक डाउन कर सकते हो कि आज अगर किसी को टैक्स में जॉब करना है क्या क्या नए नए एवेन्यूज अवेलेबल है एंड ये फील्ड्स में क्या टाइप का काम होगा, क्या टाइप के एक्सपेक्टेड सैलरीज होंगे, सो पीपल गेट टू नो कि टैक्स में भी क्या क्या करियर्स अवेलेबल है.
So सबसे पहले तो आज जो alternatives available हैं to a chartered accountant, even beyond tax, are the avenues which are never available anywhere. जैसे मैंने आपको बताया, I qualified in 1980, and at that time you either did audit or taxation. There was nothing else which you did. And I'll narrate to you separately the journey of how I, who was really an audit person, ventured into tax and stayed there just by sheer coincidence. And maybe there's a lesson there as to how life presents to you opportunities and how you grab those opportunities.
Can you share that anecdote if you don't mind?
Oh, sure. So I did my articles with a firm known as Nissim & Company, which is a pure audit firm, and at that point, and I did my training as an auditor. I came from a fairly modest family. So after my last exam, the alternative was to start working. So right after writing my last paper, I appeared for an interview with Ratan Mama & Company. And I remember it was a Thursday. And the partner interviewed me and said, when would you like to start working? And I said, tomorrow. I said, but your exams just got over. And I said, but I need to earn. So we started working, and it was pure audit work that I did. I qualified, thankfully, very well. And then the entire thesis was that I'm not going to work for anybody. So I said, I'm going to start my own practice, which I did. And that again was an audit practice. So a young chartered accountant starting out, we got some of the very large audits, internal audits, whatever. And then within about 2.5 years after my practice, I was invited by Mr. Ratan Mama. And Mr. Ratan Mama was again an excellent entrepreneur. He started with a 10,000 rupee loan with which he bought a table and a chair. And from there, he set up 9 offices. India. I was one of the first chartered accountants to set up offices in UAE, Oman, etc. And he came back to say, Dinesh, you've just been 2.5 years post-qualification. You left us. At that time itself, we thought, can we make you a partner? But you can't make a freshly qualified a partner. Now you spent 2.5 years. We normally take 7-8 years before you make somebody a partner. But happy to invite you to join us. And that was, I joined as an audit partner. And very curiously, what happened is one of the persons under whom I worked, somebody whom I revere, his name is Daruwala, and he was undergoing a surgery. And It was a minor surgery. He had stones in his gallbladder. But there was a point of time when there was no laser and whatever. So I'm talking about 82, 83 thereabouts. And he was to undergo an open surgery. And उसके लिए कम से कम आपको 3-3.5 महीने की छुट्टी लेनी होती है. So he came and told me कि दिनेश मैं एक काम करता हूँ, मैं छुट्टी पे जाता हूँ. आपको जरा टैक्स प्रैक्टिस हैंडल करनी है. I volunteered to do that. और जाके सिर्फ एडजमेंट लेना है. And I said, I'll handle the practice, but I'll not take adjournment. That's the only condition. And he knew I was a Sarfira guy, so I will do it my way. So I said, okay, no problems. Don't spoil any matters. And that's the first time I still remember that picture in my eyes going for my first matter to tax office. I didn't even know the entrance of the tax office, Marine Lines. And there I was hoping that I don't make a mess of it. Fortunately, I did not. And he came back after 3.5 months and he came back to say, why are you wasting your time in audit? This is where you belong. See what a lovely work you've done. And I gave up everything on audit and started focusing on tax. This was way back in 84. But life presents you opportunities. And as you fashionably say, aap raaste pe ja rahe ho, or you find something and you stumble on it and you say, ouch, and walk on, until you realize that it was actually a pot of gold and you could have picked it up. And I just looked at it and I said, no, it is a pot of gold. Let me pick it up. So it doesn't matter. My audit background, my audit training makes me a good tax professional. I am glad I underwent that. But then I liked tax and then I moved on to become a tax professional. So coming back to your question as to what are the opportunities in tax, and it's a question I could go on talking for the next 3 hours, Kushal, and I'll tell you why. When I started out, there was Indian Income Tax Act and you practice that. I still remember, today you have the Coastal Road. So it was in 1985 that the government of Maharashtra actually commissioned 2 overseas consultants to prepare a blueprint कि अगर मुंबई में coastal road हो तो कैसे होने चाहिए, और इनको फीस देनी थी, और वो फीस पे टैक्स कटना चाहिए नहीं कटना चाहिए was a work which came to me in Ratan Mama and Company. It's the first time I realized that there is a tax treaty and there is international tax. और अगर कोई देश के साथ हमारी टैक्स ट्रीटी होती है तो that overrides the Income Tax Act. And we started working on that. I still remember in 1991 when Manmohan Singh ji presented as finance minister the new economic policy, and I said, this is going to change the face of the country. I didn't know how, but I went on studying it. I said, okay, this is how tax treaties will come, foreign investments will come, develop that practice. But today, tax practice itself has mushroomed. You have people who can specialize in GST, you have people who can specialize in other acts which are associated with the Income Tax Act, the Black Money Act, Prevention of Money Laundering Act, everything that goes with it. In Dhruva, we took a very conscious decision, right or wrong, I can't comment, but that's our stated way in which we operate, that we will do only taxes and regulations which are attached to taxes. We don't want to do audit, we don't want to do anything else. So, for example, if you are restructuring a company, आपको टैक्स के अलावा you need to know SEBI में क्या होता है, FEMA में क्या होता है, stamp duties कैसे होती है. So we practice all of that. But other than that, we don't do anything else because we believe that we should practice what is our core competence, okay? Rather than exploit our relationship with somebody to do 20 different things. So, आज अगर कोई सोच रहा है, तो just let me ask you a question. What is the most topical thing in the last 1 week?
Donald Trump tariff.
What is it? Tariff is what? It's a customs duty.
Yeah.
And all of us practice customs duty. And that's probably one of the biggest emerging lines of practice. क्योंकि अगर, of course, there is a flip-flop and किसी को पता नहीं है tariff आएगा नहीं आएगी, ये तो it's a matter of time. But the moment tariffs came, companies started thinking, how can I mitigate the impact of tariff? Today, everything has been pushed back by 90 days. So the companies will start thinking कि 10% तो लगा हुआ है, अभी 26% इंडिया को जो लगा रहा था, या चाइना को 125% which is still on the cards. You don't know what will come ultimately. But people will start saying, can I restructure my supply chain? Can I say that India is doing only job work? Can I price my product differently, labor separately, etc.? Straight away, you have got issues on tariff, you have got issues on transfer pricing, you have got issues on supply chain. Anything you think of, has a tax implication. And the opportunities are just immense. So take, for example, you are aware, for example, that Europe has introduced a new tax. which is on Indian steel, etc., to go back and say green tax. कि आप अगर इंडिया में स्टील बनाते हैं, then there is use of coal, whatever, and therefore we are going to impose a tax because of whatever carbon you are using. How do you plan around that? It is just enormous. You just need to have your ears to the ground. You just need to realize what is the opportunity. I was talking to a group of young students, and very, very interesting. It was in conjunction with the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and all the senior people were sitting before the talk started, and the talk came around tariffs and Trump and all that. And I said, are we here to gossip about tariff, or do you realize that it's one of the biggest opportunities that you have? So today, when you look at tax, there are umpteen things that one can do in and around tax. And take, for example, we all learned about international taxes. I explained to you, tax treaty hoti hai, whatever. And suddenly, there was a concept कि अगर आप एक देश में रेसिडेंट हो और आप दूसरी देश में अगर काम करते हो, तो unless you have a permanent establishment, you won't be taxed. I won't be technical, just be very simple terms. And sure enough, India came back to say, आप इंडिया से माल खरीदते हो, कुछ भी करते हो, आपको फायदा होता है, pay us tax. Everybody laughed at India. And suddenly, when the Lehman Brothers happened, 2008 happened, people's revenues, countries' revenues started to shrink. OECD, which is the Organization for Developed Countries, came back to say, we need to relook at international tax. And they came up with what is known as Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 exercise, which provides taxation on the basis of market access. So the whole world of taxes, again, is vast and is changing by the day. आपने सुना होगा, just at the time of budget, the finance minister introduced a new income tax code. Now, there is not too much of difference between the old law and the new law, but committees have been constituted to rewrite the Income Tax Act. When that is written, you are on par with anybody who is a Tismar Khan. That conviction to say कि होगे कल के लोग जो खान बन के बैठे हैं, जिनकी टैक्स की नॉलेज है, लेकिन अभी तो ये नया कानून है, मैं भी पढ़ सकता हूँ, मैं भी वहां पहुंच सकता हूँ. There are just enough and more opportunities.
And इसमें when you say that कि बहुत ज़्यादा opportunities चल रहे हैं, the traditional ones which are there, let's say income tax return, then GST, then compliance and litigation, तो ये सब जो avenues है, इसमें क्या scope है एक young graduate को या तो एक young chartered accountant को, and what are like the range, like I'm not asking the exact numbers, but कोई range बता सकते हो कि ये salary expect कर सकते हैं, because there's a lot of information, like there's a lot of misinformation on कि कितना क्या हो सकता है salary ranges and all in all these avenues.
So I think your first question is a very important question, Kushal, for a reason that many of the chartered accountants जो compliance की practice कर रहे हैं, they are actually finding themselves in a very bad position today for 2-3 reasons. Bulk of the things which you could do manually are now automated. Forget artificial intelligence, which will of course add one more layer. But even without artificial intelligence today, you have got things like Clear Tax, etc., ready-made things which can prepare a tax return. In fact, today, by and large, barring your own tax number, everything ऐसे आपकी कितना tax deduct हुआ, क्या है, आपकी salary कितनी, that the income tax department can fill up and give you your return. So if you are into that traditional compliance practice, you are not adding value, it's not cerebral in nature, you are heading for big trouble. And I think there's a huge amount of scope for litigation, and I'll talk to you a little separately about how tax litigation in India has become so rampant and what are the impact of that on the growth of the country, separate subject altogether. But that's something which one can specialize in, that's something which one can do, talk about, and how does one go about it. But if today somebody is a young person wants to get into tax practice, I would rather that they got into a niche rather than get into the routine compliance, because that's not going to go anywhere. Kushal, I will give you a very concrete example. Income Tax Act में there used to be a section, अभी निकाल दिया गया है, which was that if you bought real estate, flat आपने अगर खरीदा और उसकी value अगर 10 लाख से ज़्यादा है, so you have to file a form with the government, and the government had an option to buy it by paying 15% more.
Buy it as in?
So I want to sell my flat to you. I couldn't sell it.
Okay.
I first had to go to the government file a form which was known as 37EE or 37I later on. For 2 months, the transaction had to be kept in abeyance. And the government had an option to say कि नहीं इस पे undervaluation है, मैं आपको 100 रुपए में बेच रहा हूँ, government says I'll give you 120 rupees and take away the flat. Okay. Now, it looked like a simple proposition. And there were chartered accountants, one particular chartered accountant who became very famous. He just focused on it to come back and say, what does this mean? How can I help my clients in this whole matter? Okay. He developed that practice. He started working for most of the real estate guys. After a few years, the section was abolished mercifully because government has no business to come in between two parties. By that time, he had become so good at real estate that he started a legal practice. And today he's a lawyer practicing real estate in a very nice manner. So there are opportunities galore. You have to have conviction in yourself and you've got to be focused to say, this is what I will do. And you will be able to go deep into it. Okay. As I said, we have focused on tax as a full subject. Within that, of course, there is transfer pricing. Within that, there is GST. Within that, there is M&A. There are 20 things which happen within tax. You take your focus, grow that focus and work on it. Your question on salary, I don't know how competent am I to give you that answer because this range is tremendous. But I can tell you what we think. So we would pay a fresh chartered accountant who is able to pass our HR requirements and whatever. Therefore, the chartered accountant is a good chartered accountant, would get anywhere between 11 to 12 lakh rupees as a starting salary. If he's a rank holder, he could end up getting something like 14, 15 lakhs.
Got it. And the reason I asked you the salary question was because what happens is people nowadays, they feel that they want to do something very unconventional. Like they want to get into corporate finance. They want to get into, let's say, management trainee profiles. They want to get into consulting, investment banking. Because one of the major reasons is also that the pay scale at investment bank or a management consulting is usually higher, is what is the narrative in the market. So I just wanted to break the myth, or maybe I just wanted to clarify that even in tax related roles which are there, the pay is not as bad or maybe as less as compared to an investment bank or a management consulting.
I would actually doubt it at all. I agree with you. आजकल कुशल अगर आप audit भी देखें, has become so complicated. Okay, the number of standards that you have to comply, Indes, the disclosure, ESG requirements, people are paid very, very well. And the way I see it is that organizations which are determined to deliver value to the clients and charge an appropriate fee can do so only if they have got quality resources. And one of the things for a quality resource, I said, the number of parameters for which you retain a talent, one of them is you pay well. So there is Kushal, I can give you another practical experience we had. So I mentioned to you that, in my firm, we have few articles and we're fortunate that we end up getting many people who are rank holders. So here was a time about 2 years ago when we had 5 rank holders and we were all very happy. So जिन पार्टनर के साथ ये आर्टिकलशिप काम कर रहे थे, मैंने पूछा that are they continuing with the firm? And the answer was no. And I said that are we doing something wrong? अगर हमने किसी को ट्रेनिंग दी है, किसी ने हमारे साथ 2-3 साल काम किया हुआ है और उसको रैंक मिली है, तो हमारे साथ क्यों नहीं करियर आगे बढ़ाएगा? So I met up with each one of them. And it was an experience for me. So one person came to me, you don't remember me, Dinesh, but my dad is a partner in one of the big 4 and he called you up and you were kind enough to give me articles. I have got an experience of a lifetime. I can tell you that when I go and share with my dad the type of experience that I got, he says that none of the articles in the big 4 get it. So then why are you not continuing with us? And he gave me a remarkable answer. He said, well, my dad came from a very modest family. He had to work. He worked himself, became a partner in one of the big 4, etc. But now I have got something to back me up and I want to do a startup. And I think that that's what will give me, I can afford to take that risk. My dad couldn't afford to take that risk. Great enough. I met another guy and said, are you happy with the perks? I'm very happy. I said, no, you're talking rubbish. If you are happy, you would continue with us. Said, I've got a twin brother and my twin brother is with another big 4. And This is not being negative on anybody. My brother every morning sulks going to the office, and he sees me how enthusiastic I am to come to office. So why you not continue? No, I want to do PhD. I want to go overseas and do PhD, and that's why. So people have their own reasons. But as you rightly said, in today's date and time, if you are a good resource working for a good organization, you will get roughly equivalent compensation.
Yeah, I think it's all about the kind of value that you are also adding in that company. And it's also about कि वो company के लिए आप कितना value add कर रहे हो and basis that उनको कितना benefit हो रहा है. I think that is something which is a factor of the
Pick the right organization.
Yeah, correct. Also, a question on the courses front. Now, let's say someone who wants to get into taxation, okay? CA तो एक course है, of course, like which will give you a thorough knowledge about कि okay tax में क्या होता है, etc. Audit में क्या होता है. But अगर किसी को बहुत practical knowledge चाहिए about taxation, especially M&A tax, transfer pricing, international tax, what are like some courses according to you they should pursue right from their college days ताकि उनको एक practical exposure या तो एक idea आ जाए कि okay ये सारे tax laws में होता क्या है. आप क्या recommend करोगे?
So, two things. एक तो ये है कि institute itself has developed specialized postgraduate courses, whether it is international tax, everything else. So those are certificate courses, and they expose you to a higher degree of knowledge, and those are something which you can pursue. I think best thing really is reading and reading a lot. If I sit back and reflect what helped me with my career, I remember when I would read for my chartered accountancy, we would go through annual accounts. Of course, now everything has become digital. That time which you printed accounts, and you would just go back and look at notes to accounts, analyze what things are happening. And it's a lot that you can get out of that. Today, you read some of the very good journals. So Bombay Chartered Accountants Society has got a BCA journal, and you'll get case studies out there. The Chamber of Income Tax Consultant has got its own journal, and again, wonderful. So just going to specifically take one of the things, which might not appear to be a tax subject, but is very much a tax subject, which is succession planning. Now, succession planning has got two limbs. One is a strategic limb, which of course the McKinseys and the BCGs of the world will do. And then there is how do you implement it from a tax and a regulatory perspective. And sometimes you may have a lot of good ideas, but implementing them has got huge tax, stamp duty consequences, SEBI consequences. You can't do it unless you find solutions to that. Now, a Chamber of Income Tax Consultant will come out with a special issue on succession planning. And there'll be some 10, 20 articles there written by celebrities. You read that, and by and large, you are sorted to say, at least I have going in knowledge that this is what is entailed in our exercise for a succession planning. So today, the avenues open are just amazing. Just the other day, again, going back, one of the institutes, again, Chamber of Income Tax Consultant, had organized a full day seminar just on succession planning. And I was leading one of the panel discussions, and the variety of things that we dealt with that was exposed to the whole audience, and was an audience of with 300-400 people out there, is amazing. So today, avenues of knowledge, and you know that how there's a proliferation. It's a question of deciding what you want and how do you go about it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And when you said about that specialization thing where one of your friends was just practicing on that real estate section, I also remember an example where Mr. Nani Palkhiwala used to just practice on section 37 subsection 1 of Income Tax Act. And he used to just figure out all the case laws and all the case studies of that section 37 subsection 1 of Income Tax Act, which as far as I remember was the general expense.
Incurred wholly and exclusive for the purpose of the. So I don't think it would be fair to say that Mr. Palkhiwala, God bless his soul, specializes at one section. He specialized not only in the entirety of Income Tax Act, but also on constitution and various other things. But what happens is that under section 37, which is the omnibus section, which is any expenditure which has been wholly and incurred for the purpose of business, should be allowed. And the tax office has this huge tendency to disallow expenditure. Quantum of expenditure, whether they can go into the valuation, whether it was right to spend, not to spend, etc., etc. And subject to now, of course, transfer pricing and everything else, expenditure which is incurred for the purpose of business ought to be allowed. And the case laws which he argued and fought, and it was amazing. But I don't think it would be right to say he specialized in that one section.
Got it.
He was far too big a personality to talk about that.
Got it. And let's say now someone who is let's say starting their tax practice or they want to make a career in tax, आपके हिसाब से ऐसे कौन से अपॉर्चुनिटीज है ग्लोबली आउटसाइड इंडिया दैट वो इंडिया में बैठ के भी काम कर सकते हैं एंड ग्लोबली दे कैन केटर टू अ लॉट ऑफ क्लाइंट्स, लाइक कौन से सर्विसेज या फील्ड हो गए?
Let me answer your question slightly differently, Kushal, because you're asking me a very, very interesting question. So, as an organization, we in Dhruva, करीब 7 साल पहले we had a partners meeting and we realized that UAE, United Arab Emirates, had no taxes and for the first time was introducing VAT. VAT was, of course, a 5% tax which would pass to the customer. And we all sat back and reflected कि ये ऐसा देश है जहाँ पे there is no requirement to maintain accounts, not do audit unless you wanted money from the bank and you got your accounts audited, but nobody, there's nothing mandatory. And now suddenly they will have to produce their accounts to the tax office to demonstrate what is a taxable turnover and what is not a taxable turnover. And we decided to set up an office in UAE. Today we have 2 offices, one in Dubai, one in Abu Dhabi, and we are a team of 120 people there. We are probably among the largest tax practices in that country. And while we have a variety of talents, we have got people from Australia, Ukraine, Africa, Egypt, whatever, but bulk 80% of the people are Indians. And if anybody has understood the Indian law and Indian tax law, you can practice anywhere in the world. I think Indians have this ability to go global. I think we are not being entrepreneurial enough. One thing our Prime Minister has taught us is to be entrepreneurial, be adventurous and do things. And the world is an oyster for us. We need to be. Your question, of course, to me was, can I do things in India for the world? Which, of course, you can. And those are global capability centers, Kushal. You know that there's a particular capability center which has got more than 4 lakh people doing only global tax work sitting out of India.
Wow.
Okay, that's a massive scale because anything that can be done electronically, you can do it here. So, for example, if you have to do US tax filing return, and each state has a different requirement, then you can sitting here and be trained on it and do it in India. When it began, very interestingly, you filled in the return, but when it was required to be signed, it has to be signed by a CPA. So it would go to USA, a CPA would sign and file. Then people started getting trained as CPAs in India, and they didn't even need that. So they could do all the work themselves. Similarly, look at transfer pricing. Now, what is transfer pricing? In very simple terms, it is transactions between related parties who are doing things globally and to show that they are at an arm's length. That in each country, you have profits which are commensurate with what work you are doing there. मतलब ये जो कानून है ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग का, ये पूरी दुनिया में एक ही. अगर आपने इंडियन ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग किया, आप कहीं पे भी कर सकते हो. Now, global documentation happens in India, and India is very good at it. There are people who understand that, people who practice it, and there are tens of thousands of people again being employed by BPOs, KPOs, global capability centers to do that. So there's nothing which you can't do. One of the barriers used to be language, and now Indians have come back to say, okay, if I need to do tax filing for a European country and it's Italian thing, I will learn Italian. What's the big deal about it? And we have seen people do that. So frankly, you cannot sign off unless you have qualification, which is acceptable to that other country. Other than that, in terms of your ability to do things, your knowledge is all there and you can do all of it.
तो आपने बताया एक जीसीसी ग्लोबल कैपेबिलिटी सेंटर एम्प्लॉयज 4 लाख पीपल, तो आप एक्सप्लेन कर सकते हो कि एग्जैक्टली ये जीसीसी काम करता क्या है, एंड आप जब बता रहे हो ग्लोबल टैक्स का पूरा काम करता है, तो क्या क्या सर्विसेज देता है एंड कौन से क्लाइंट्स को एंड उनको कैसे बेनिफिट होता है?
So now we are moving a little bit away from tax because capability centers, EPOs, KPOs, capability centers, whatever we want to call them, essentially operate like factories. They are people who are process oriented. They are able to perfect a process कि अगर आपको ये करना है, there are 70 things that you need to do, and they train people how to do those 70 things, and you produce output which is almost like a factory. Now, Indian BPOs, capability centers, do everything from accounting. आज जो पूरी audit होती है, so take for example, this is how it began, कि अगर आपने एक company ले ली like IBM, now IBM के अगर number of workers हैं, there are more people in India than in USA.
Wow.
India is the highest employment center for them, okay? Because the consulting work that they do overseas is best done from India at a much lower competitive cost. अगर इसकी accounting करनी है, there's an accounting center. अगर उसकी audit करनी है, all audit is done electronically today. Why does that person who is doing the audit need to sit in USA? You can do the entire audit from here. After you have done the audit, you have to determine the income. The people who understand all of that here, they can compile the return here. Everything is possible to be done out here. So today, 90% of the audit is completed here for the purpose of review by a audit partner in USA who then after reviews, ensures quality check and signs it off.
Got it. And इंडिया में बैठ के अगर कोई यूएस सिटीजन है या तो कोई दूसरे सिटीजन है, मैं उनके इनकम टैक्स रिटर्न्स इंडिया में बैठ के फाइल कर सकता हूँ?
बिल्कुल कर सकता है, बट एज आई सेड यूएसए में एवरी रिटर्न इज रिक्वायर्ड टू बी सर्टिफाइड बाय अ चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट, व्हिच इज नॉट सो इन इंडिया. सो अगर आपने कोई पोजीशन ली है यूएस टैक्स रिटर्न में, it has to be signed off by a chartered accountant, and who can sign off only if he believes that more likely than not you will succeed on that. So return can be prepared by anybody in India, but ultimately it will be signed off by a competent person. If that center has got a capable certified person to do that, he can do it here. Otherwise you do all the work, goes to USA, they sign off there and then move on.
And when you say chartered accountant, is it the CPA of
CPA,
US?
that's right.
Okay, got it. तो उसके लिए फिर CPA भी करना पड़ेगा?
बिल्कुल
And
करना पड़ेगा. There are thousands of CPAs in India.
Okay, got it. Fair. And one more thing, so you said कि UAE में जैसे आप डिस्कशन कर रहे थे आपके ऑफिस में कि जब VAT आया, that was like an opportunity. ऐसे आज की तारीख में आपको कोई ऐसे कंट्रीज, जैसे 4-5 कंट्रीज दिख रहे हैं जहाँ पर टैक्स में कोई अपॉर्चुनिटी आ सकती है in terms of working or helping clients in those countries? ऐसे कोई 3-4 हो गए?
So, let me answer it this way. We are lucky. We went to UAE when the tax was being introduced. क्योंकि हर प्रोफेशनल के करियर में जिंदगी में शायद एक ऐसा मौका मिलता है when you are at a place जहाँ पे टैक्स पहली बार लागू हो रहा है. That happened. Now 4 साल के बाद corporate tax came. There was no corporate tax. Now we started working on corporate tax. Now transfer pricing has come there, so we are working on transfer pricing. Now tomorrow, individual tax in the company, there is no individual tax, it's still only corporate tax. Okay?
अच्छा,
We have different opportunity altogether.
so there's no individual tax in Dubai?
In UAE, yeah.
As in UAE.
That's
Okay, so only
In fact,
companies
in-
pay tax.
Yeah. In fact, in the entire GCC, 7 countries in GCC, the only country which levies individual tax is Oman. Others have not yet introduced. They will introduce at some point of time.
Okay. कौन से ये बाकी के 6 कंट्रीज?
So you have got Qatar, you have got so UAE के पूरा Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain. These are the countries. So they all have started introducing. Kuwait was the last to introduce corporate tax. Okay, individual tax is just one country. Nobody has introduced individual taxes.
Got it. So if let's say someone is staying in these countries, उनको इंडिविजुअल सैलरीज पे कोई भी टैक्स
कोई भी
पे नहीं करना पड़ेगा, बस कंपनी जो प्रॉफिट्स कमा रही है उस पे टैक्स पे करना पड़ेगा.
And just think of it, Kushal, you understand taxes. So आपकी कंपनी है कि आप कंपनी के मालिक हैं, आपकी कंपनी मुनाफा करेगी beyond a particular limit, you have to pay a 9% tax. If the company pays you a right salary, that is deductible and you don't pay tax. So you can just start thinking of what planning one can do, how can one go about doing things. And Indians have the most fertile mindset okay, on how to do things.
Yeah. तो ये केस में फिर आपको लगता है इंडिया में कभी ऐसा सिचुएशन आएगा जहाँ पर ओनली कॉर्पोरेट्स विल बी टैक्स्ड, इंडिविजुअल्स शुड नॉट बी टैक्स्ड? डू यू थिंक दैट इज राइट, लाइक इट्स अ राइट वे ऑफ टैक्सेशन?
See, again, it's a very philosophical question, Kushal. So, what Trump is saying when he is trying to introduce tariff is to say, I don't want income tax, I want only tariff. Okay? And that used to be a situation up till 1929. Okay? And then income tax got introduced. Now, tariff, in a sense, is a consumption tax. And income tax is a tax on your income The general proposition is that income tax is equitable because more you earn, the higher you pay. So it is more burdensome on those who can afford and less burdensome on those who cannot. But let's assume that you have a GST, and a GST is say 18%. Now, whether somebody who's earning 10,000 rupees a month buys a product, he also pays 18%. And if somebody is earning 10 lakh rupees, he also pays 18%. Okay? So is it equitable? Is it not? It's a more philosophical question. There is also this whole thing that globally there is a tax mechanism. You pay tax in one country, it gets created in another. So it's a whole mechanism. Can the mechanism be disbanded? Yes. Is it likely to be? Not in the near future.
So आपको लगता है कि like individuals paying taxes versus corporates paying taxes, corporates are paying that is fair, but individuals after the salary is deducted and individuals को जो मिल रहा है उस पे income tax pay करना as of now is not.
No, I'm not saying that at all.
So you think income tax is
fair? I'm saying that the proposition is that income tax is fair because it levies tax on people on the basis of their ability to pay.
So GST is something which is not fair, is what you're trying to say.
GST. So what I'm saying that अगर एक आदमी झोपड़पट्टी में रहता है और एक आदमी महल में रहता है, if they go to buy a biscuit, both will end up paying the same tax. Yeah. And therefore, it is taking money from people who may not be able to afford it. Income tax work on the basis of affordability. It is bringing equity, which GST is not.
बट ये बाकी कंट्रीज में है, ये जो आपने 6 कंट्रीज के नाम बताए, तो उसमें इनकम टैक्स लेवी करने का रीजन क्या, नहीं लेवी करने का क्या रीजन होगा?
So, first of all, they are not a representative of the world. They were originally tax havens. अगर आप दुबई में देखें तो what used to happen before the VAT got introduced was that you would stay in a house. The only people who could own the property at that time were locals, and they would charge you rent. That's how they got their money. You paid parking charges, you paid water tax, electricity, and the government got its dues. But there was no tax. Okay? That became a very attractive situation. Now, there came a situation where OECD was putting UAE into a grey list on FATF to come back and say, जहाँ पे there is no verification आपकी income सही है नहीं है, because there is no tax. And they said, no, we will introduce tax. Okay. One of the requirements I mentioned to you about OECD Pillar 1, Pillar 2, one of the recommendations of Pillar 2 was कि हर country को minimum 15% tax लगाना चाहिए. The basis was that countries can compete with each other on the basis of consumption, what facilities you provide, ease of doing business. You can't compete with the rate of tax. अगर एक country बोलेगी कि मैं 0 लगाऊंगा, दूसरा 25 लगाएगा, there is a competition among countries, and that is not fair. That was the proposition. And UAE came back to say, we will introduce a 9% tax, and now there are 2 rates of tax, 9 for only domestic companies, and for companies which are beyond UAE, multinational so to say, have to pay a 15% tax.
Got it. एंड आपने टैक्स हेवेंस की बात की, और वैसे कौन से कंट्रीज है जो टैक्स हेवेंस है?
और टैक्स हेवेंस तो काफी सारे हैं. सो देयर इज Bahamas, British Virgin Islands, number of them, Jersey, Guernsey.
एंड यहाँ पर टैक्स हेवन एज इन अगर कोई एक कंपनी इनकॉर्पोरेट करता है ये कंट्रीज में, तो देयर इज no tax at all. So not even corporates, no individual, nothing.
No, nothing.
Okay.
So these are basically island countries where the economy is very, very small. अगर आप वहाँ पे कंपनी फॉर्म करते हैं तो वहाँ पे जो प्रोफेशनल्स हैं उनको मैनेजमेंट चार्जेस मिलते हैं, डायरेक्टरशिप चार्जेस मिलते हैं. That's sufficient for them.
Okay.
And all of these are now getting blacklisted.
अच्छा.
And the world is coming down heavily on them to come back and say, if you are dealing with a tax haven, so in India, if you deal with a tax haven and you are paying any money, then you have to deduct higher TDS compared to otherwise.
Okay. And you have to deduct higher TDS, deposit it to the
Government in India.
It's a government in India. Even if you are paying to the tax haven.
That's
okay, got it. Because I think बहुत बार ऐसा होता था कि people used to just incorporate a dummy or a shell company in these tax havens for like evading taxes.
Yeah.
And this is like one of the reasons why this would have been done. Perfect. आपने ये बताया कि Honorable Prime Minister is also supporting entrepreneurship in the previous answer, and you as a CA have also taken a plunge into entrepreneurship. We are seeing a lot of CAs take a plunge into entrepreneurship. But question here is, do you think that chartered accountants can be amazing entrepreneurs? And if yes, why?
I think it's a very, very interesting question. And I recently had a occasion to speak about it at the Institute's forum. The way I look at it is that what is it? You are a chartered accountant, you are a rank holder. What is it that you got taught? You got a few things. You learned how to look at things analytically. It's a very important thought process. You learn conservatism. You learn commerce. You learn to see how do you value things commercially. Who are people who are entrepreneurs? Entrepreneurs are people who can think commercially, who can come back and say, here is something on which there is a value, which people are not able to see. I think I can create that value. Whether it is e-commerce, it is whatever else, you are seeing value. And I can't think of any other profession barring an MBA where you're trained to think in a manner that you can be successful entrepreneurs. And chartered accountants are very well grounded. You are very comfortable with numbers. I would think chartered accountants are great entrepreneurs. I can go a little bit deeper into that, Kushal. So look at companies. I saw the book that you have written and I got a foreword by Deepak Parekh. And Deepak is a chartered accountant. And he didn't practice accountancy. He set up a housing company, housing finance company, a bank, and whatever else. And the market capitalization of what he created is almost equal to one of the largest companies in the country. He's a chartered accountant, but he's an entrepreneur to the core.
Yeah.
Right? And you can find 100 such examples of companies which are, well, the CEOs. I'm sort of taking a holistic perspective. One view is that how many companies, there may be companies which are technical in nature, engineering companies, whatever else, and we find the person sitting at the helm of it is a commercial person, a chartered accountant, whatever, because he knows how to run the business. He does not need to be a technical expert. Okay? That's what you get. So the form of an entrepreneurship. And you look at chartered accountants who have risen to be heads. So we spoke about Deepak Bhai. Motilal Oswal, you mentioned you studied in the same boarding where he was there, and hostel where he was there. And he's an entrepreneur. Right? It's one thing to say he understands numbers, he's able to analyze companies, but that's one part. It's a different thing to say I'm going to create an organization with an all India presence and I'll brand myself, because being an entrepreneur requires 100 different things to do. Branding, management, or 20 the things that you go on day in, day out. He did it. Again, a successful entrepreneur. You go back and see how many entrepreneurs are on the startups thing. On Naukri.com. I can go on give you examples after examples, and chartered accountants can be entrepreneurs. The question is, do you want to move out of your comfort zone? What did you do, Kushal? You come back to say, I was working in Birla. I'm sure you've been paid very, very well. You worked with a chief economist, somebody whom I know well and whom I respect very well. And maybe you're going to go on doing your work there and then sort of lead a cushy life. And you came back to say, no, I'm going to start something which is very, very different on communication side. Really? So it's a question of taking plunge, having that courage of conviction. And of course, in going about it, implementing in a very, very systematic manner. And I think chartered accountants can do it better than anybody.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there are a lot of even unicorn startup founders who have been CAs, like Aman Gupta of Boat. Even Zetworks, one of the co-founders, is a CA. Ashwin Damera of Eruditus and Emeritus, the largest edtech in India right now. So I think, yeah, CA mein probably what I feel is that you are exposed to numbers. Firstly, analytical skills are very, very strong. It's just that communication or the softer skills is lacking a bit, but I think that can be improved, or maybe that can be learned over time is what I feel. And once you master that, I think like you ought to be successful.
Yeah. So two things. One is, of course, how your education and upbringing is. Second is, there's enough and more opportunity to learn. I see in my organization, we of course, train our people specifically in soft skills, in public speaking, in whatever else. But there's enough that one can do. And beyond a point, capability speaks. Everything else is periphery. It's great to be a good speaker. It's good to be a nice orator, whatever else. But at the end of the day, it's your capability that matters.
Yeah. Since we're talking on entrepreneurship, can you also share the story of आपने जब एकदम high paying job छोड़ा and you thought that you want to start something of your own. कैसा mindset था? And because when you reach us, like you were the deputy CEO, right? Like before doing the
KPMG.
job for KPMG. So it's like one of the best roles plus one of the best designations also, and a very, very comfortable high paying job with a lot of perquisites. तो कैसे डिसाइड किया कि खुद का कुछ शुरू करना है from scratch, and what was that story?
So all the big four, including KPMG, are really great organizations. You, sitting as a deputy CEO, are exposed to a number of things which you enjoy. You enjoy the reputation, you enjoy the aura that goes with it. My question was very simple, that maybe a major portion of my time as a deputy CEO of KPMG and the chairman of the tax practice was more on internal management of the organization. And I'm a hardcore professional. People come to the organization that I am because they believe that I'll be able to think outside the box, provide a solution, my team may work, but then they are happy to know that I'm available when needed. And in the organization where I was treated very well. I was very satisfied with what was happening. But I felt that a huge portion of my time went into nothing but internal management. And my question was making a call that is that what I wanted to do? And beyond a point also, Kushal, as I fashionably say, the Gujarati in me got better of me to say, how much value will you create for others and when will you create value for yourself? I must say it was not a journey without a lot of trepidation. You sit back and reflect, and my point was that today as a deputy CEO of KPMG, I can make a call to anybody in the ministry and my call will be received. I can talk to entrepreneurs, businessmen, and they will talk to me. Will the same thing happen when you are on your own, you start your journey? And I must narrate to you this, that as I was thinking about this whole thing, my wife Seema, and she's a housewife, and sometimes we underrate their innate skills. So one fine day, she made a comment to me saying, Dinesh, you don't seem to be sleeping well these days. So I sat down with her and I said, yeah, I think I want to move outside of KPMG, do a lot more technical work. The organization values me and there is nothing wrong, but simply that I want to do something on my own. This is what's stopping you. And like a typical housewife, she said, if you want, I will ensure that we manage on the expenditure. We will not do this and we will not have foreign trips. So no. That is not the concern. The concern that I have is that will the respect that I enjoy in the community go down one bit? And she made a comment which shook me. She said, but assume for a moment that it happens. Do you still want to do it? Because there's a true test that you want to make it happen. And I said, wow, I never thought like this. And I said, no, I'm going to accept that some of the biggest businessmen whom I know, earlier they took my call because I was deputy CEO of KPMG. Now they may not, but I still want to do it. And it just happens, how some simple conversations can make you think and make you do things differently. And I said, no, I want to do this. We started Dhruva. And it was quite a journey, Kushal. I spoke to you rather eloquently about saying, oh, you need to have a nice working environment, you need to pay well and all of that. But you're starting out, you got goosebumps in your stomach. Will you get work? And we're very, very lucky that from day one, we got the best of the work. We started working for some of the largest organizations in the country. People were kind. I didn't realize when I started out कि Big Four की बाद की market है या नहीं, because that was yet to be tested. जब मैंने practice शुरू की, तो the only non-Big firm was BMR. Earlier, of course, RSM. So earlier, the RSM of which I was a part was the non-Big Four. Then there was BMR. And my question was, is there a room? And I was very pleasantly surprised that Big Four, they have a brand which is global, which goes into decades, maybe centuries, and they do fabulous work. And the question was, can an Indian organization, locally grown, really create a brand and a name for itself? We're lucky. We got work from people that trusted us. And then came the situation that how do you build an organization which is different? And while it may appear that all of this was a well thought through plan, it really wasn't. You would have heard that saying that none of us are adults. We just learn as we grow up. Nobody has answers. So we started the organization, and I started saying, what's going to be different compared to a Big Four? And within the first few months, we said that within a Big Four, which again, I said, are great organizations, there's a huge amount of competition because people are chasing numbers, people have targets, people are wanting to outgrow each other within the Big Four, within the organization itself. And I said, no, we don't want to chase numbers. And we took a decision which at that time people were refusing to believe that there are no targets in the firm. They said, we'll, as partner group, work together to make the firm successful, help each other rather than focus on targets. Coincidentally, that brought through another issue that we will not go out and pitch for work. We will do whatever else we are doing, whether it's in terms of doing technical work, speaking in the electronic media, speaking in print media, but we will not go out and ask anybody for work because that's not what you did as a professional. You didn't grow to be a chartered accountant, to be a salesman. So we took some of these calls, and those calls worked for us. I said, I had partners joining me, and there are partners who for 6 months, 8 months did not even claim reimbursement of a rupee because they felt the firm couldn't afford it. The firm could very well. And I then actually had to force them to say, guys, please, this is money that you have spent on a rent of office and you can't be paying from your pocket. But we were very lucky. We were lucky we got good quality people. Clients trusted us. When I started, Kushal, when I was approached by some of the clients, and question was, what organization, how many people, what do you want to create? And hand on heart, honestly, I had no idea. As I fashionably say, log milte gaye, karwa banta gaya. I didn't realize that there was such a lot of market for people who wanted to be happy doing what they are doing and contented what they are doing rather than chasing numbers all the time. So we created that organization, created that institution. And today, people look at Dhruva and say, oh, you have 400 and so many people. Wow, you have got so many offices. None of that matters to me. Are my people happy? Genuinely happy? Can they call this place their own? Like when somebody is walking, you mentioned that you're this one guy. And I would like people in Dhruva to carry a chip on their shoulder. Not of vanity, not of ego, but of pride of belonging. There was a point of time, and of course times have changed. Infosys was a premier organization, and a driver of Infosys would be saying, I'm not just a driver, I'm a driver at Infosys. And I would like to go back and say, yes, if somebody is working in Dhruva, they should say, yes, I'm a pilot. Why? Because we're an organization which, I don't know, Kushal, whether you are aware at all, but Dhruva is a case study in IIM Ahmedabad.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So 5 years into our journey, 2 of the professors of IIM came, spent a few weeks with us. It's now a part of their curriculum. And just recently, they're in the process of updating the case study. Wow. And quite likely, it's going to be a Harvard case study.
Wow.
But it's more about culture. It's not about size. And I'm saying, if you are focusing on size, you're going wrong. You focus on the culture, what's right for the organization, build on that culture, have a conviction, ethics, integrity, how are you going to deal with issues, diversity, your relation to the community, put all of those building blocks. Things will happen.
At what age did you took a plunge into entrepreneurship?
Fairly early in my life. No, 57.
Oh, 57. Wow. So, I mean, I've heard that it's usually difficult to take a plunge after, like, let's say 50s, 55, because I mean, you are comfortable with such a
No, so when I say 57, it's maybe not a right answer. Even my journey in RSM was an entrepreneur journey. I was the managing partner of Ratan Mama and Company, Ashok Wada, whom you have interviewed, Gautam Doshi, Ketan Dalal. We all merged our practices and we came together and we created an organization, which again today all of us are extremely proud of. It lasted 10 years. After 10 years, we merged the tax practice into PwC. But that was purely entrepreneurial. And so the seeds of entrepreneurship were there already. What happens is that when you're running RSM, many of us had never experienced the Big Four, and the grass looks greener on the other side. So we said, let's go Big Four. Maybe this is not. So again, Kushal, I can narrate this to you. So in RSM was the acronym for Ratan S. Mama and Company, which was the organization of which I was the managing partner then. And we would have partner evaluation or a 360-degree feedback mechanism or whatever else. And we would wonder, in the Big Four, there must be a global platform and if things must be happening and here we have to do our own things. You start fretting about things which are actually useless. You realize that later in life. So we merged and we asked within the organization, the merged organization, that how do you evaluate partners? Evaluate partners? We've never done that. So you start realizing, why gosh, the things which I thought were all given were not given, and then actually we help implement them. But so for me, life has taken 180 degree. So right from my career starting, when, as I told you, I joined Ratan Mama and Company, left to create my own firm, then rejoined Ratan Mama and Company as a partner, which was purely an entrepreneurial venture. Took it to different heights. I told you about how I started doing tax practice, then I built up the tribunal litigation practice, international tax practice, went on to become the managing partner after Mr. Mama passed away, God bless his soul. And then Ashok and others came back to say, why don't we come together to create a truly global Indian firm? And we did that, working together, we did that, ran it for 10 years, went through the journey of the Big Four and came back to say, that's not the right thing. What you're doing was the right thing. So came back and recreated the firm. So at one level, if you look at the entrepreneur journey at Dhruva, that started when I was 56, 57. Otherwise, I've always been an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And you've been the deputy CEO at KPMG. What's your best memory of working there? And what is something that, I wouldn't say the worst memory, but maybe what is something that was the low light, like the highlight and lowlights of the stint at a Big Four?
Honestly, I really can't think of a low light because the journey was very good. I think one of the best memories of KPMG was that internal processes, which were probably world class. How do you do a quality review? How do you do a risk assessment? And probably if you come to think of it as to what was the low light or was the worst, maybe what was best was also the worst. That the organization was so focused internally on risk management and all of that, that became an end in itself. So a lot of time went into client acceptance forms and risk management and things like that, as opposed to working on client-related matters. But no bad memories, really good memories, worked with a great set of people, outstanding people. In fact, it was a different experience because as a deputy CEO, tax was one of the things I did. I also overlooked the entire advisory practice. And the advisory practice is an elephant. It's basically, you're looking at risk consulting, you're looking at human resources, you're looking at SAP implementation, you're looking at investment banking, number of things, and got exposed to all of that. I know you ask a question, and actually if you asked me a question through my life that what were the bad or difficult moments, I would actually struggle. I think God has been extremely kind. I viewed the difficult moments as maybe learning opportunities, genuinely, and this is not posturing. I'm fairly satisfied with what destiny has provided.
Yeah. I mean, that is a very good answer as well. Just if we can talk more on the tax policies front as well, since you're a tax expert yourself, and a lot of changes have happened in India in the past about the tax structures and tax systems. We spoke about the GST thing as well. What do you think are the top 3 changes, according to you, that the Indian economy needs today as far as the current taxation system is concerned?
There's a lot of focus on tax policy. And actually, while the Indian tax policy can be a lot better, I have been on record saying that there is not much wrong with India's tax policy. It is consistent with what is there globally. I think what ails India is the implementation of the policy. There used to be this whole ease of doing business guide, which was brought out by PwC globally, where countries all over the world were rated. And India had a dubious distinction of being very low. And then after Prime Minister Modi came, he made conscious effort and we moved up. And while we moved up decently up, it was still way down. And the only thing which pulled the ease of doing business in India down was tax policies. It was nothing else. It was tax, not tax policies. The issue with India on taxation front is the gap between what the politicians or people at a policy level want and what the people at the ground level do. I can give you innumerable examples. You make everything electronic. And the idea is that if you are talking to a faceless assessment, when I grew up, I remember going to tax office, dingy offices, smelly offices. You go to a tax officer, there is a bench outside, which is like in a police station, and you take a small chit and give your name inside, and the clerk will take you. And the question was, can we avoid interface between the taxpayer or his or her representative and the tax gatherer? Because if people interact, then there is a question of whether favoritism happened, whether there was corruption, whatever else. So you create a policy to say that this is a faceless assessment. Now, in a faceless assessment, the person on the other side is faceless. You are not. If that person wants to do corruption, that person knows how to reach you. And he will reach you.
Yeah.
So if you ask people, and I'm not a right person to answer that corruption levels have not gone down at all, because faceless has happened, but people are reached by whoever else, some intermediaries, and come back to say that officer, if you do X, Y, Z, they are take. So just look at the policy and the implementation of the policy. Another policy example question, and you might want to relate with it. Are you familiar with the term dispute resolution panel?
Yeah.
So the proposition was very simple. An income tax officer on an international tax case or a transfer pricing case, if he makes an addition, he has to pass a draft order. And you have a choice of going to a dispute resolution panel. The dispute resolution panel comprises of 3 commissioners. So the question was, one officer might, for whatever reason, make a massive addition, but 3 commissioners will apply themselves and bring about sanity. What happened in practice? So dispute resolution panel was supposed to resolve dispute, meaning if they give you a benefit, the officer could not go in appeal. So the dispute resolution panel became a rubber stamp, saying if we give you a relief, officer cannot go in appeal. You can go in appeal if you don't give you. No, policy, implementation of the policy. But that's a real issue. The issue is not about Indian policy. Can things be done right about the policy? And you ask me a question, can you name 2-3 things? And I'll give you some examples there definitely. But key is implementation. Are people on the ground? So I'll give you one last example on the policy versus implementation. So we spoke earlier on about BPOs. So one of the first BPOs which happened in Gurgaon was one of the very reputed foreign banks. They set up a BPO in Gurgaon. They're the first. And They went to Ministry of Commerce. The Ministry of Commerce said you are a valid SEZ and your income is free for 10 years. They went back happy and they filed a tax return. And the officer said, who is the Ministry of Commerce to say your income is tax free? Under Indian income tax, you are supposed to manufacture or produce an article or thing for your income to be tax free. You are doing data processing. I refuse. Then, of course, they represented and the law got amended. But again, there was a year where it was not. Okay? But just the policy and the implementation of the policy. So Income Tax Act will come back and say this income is exempt from tax. The officer will find 50 reasons why he should deny you that exemption. And I'm not saying he's right or wrong. It's a question of approach. It's a question of interpretation. Leave that aside. On what changes could happen. And one of the things, is a beauty of the Indian income tax law, Kushal. तो अगर आप इंडिया का कानून देखते हैं तो हर ऑफिसर वही एक्ट और वही ट्रीटी को इंटरप्रेट कर सकता है अपने तरीके से. और कानून क्या कहता है इनकम टैक्स एक्ट कि कोई भी सीबीडीटी, कोई भी कमिश्नर, कोई अफसर को कभी नहीं बोलेगा कि उसको कोई मैटर को किस तरह से डील करनी है. Again, that must have been sort of British Raj, don't interfere in the work of a lower bureaucrat so that there is no corruption, interference, whatever. तो आज क्या हो गया? एक ही कानून है आपका. एक फ्लोर पे 4 अफसर है. आपकी फाइल अगर ये 4 अफसर में गई तो चारों अलग अलग इंटरप्रिटेशन लेंगे और उनको हक है ये इंटरप्रिटेशन लेने का. बिकॉज ईच पर्सन इज पासिंग हिज ओन थिंग. कैन इट एवर बी लाइक दैट? क्योंकि अगर एक टैक्स ट्रीटी है, कोई आदमी को आप पैसा भेज रहे हैं, आपको टैक्स काटना है नहीं काटना है, वही ट्रीटी एक आदमी एक इंटरप्रेट करेगा, दूसरा आदमी दूसरा करेगा इंटरप्रेट. किस तरह से 6 साल तक किसी ने एक इंटरप्रिटेशन किया, 7वें साल आके बोलते नो मेरे जो प्रेडिसेसर ने किया वो ठीक नहीं है, मैं तो ये बोलता हूँ. सो इट्स अ क्वेश्चन ऑफ हाउ डू यू इम्प्लीमेंट, हाउ डू यू ब्रिंग कंसिस्टेंसी. Tax make, what is the most important thing, Kushal? One is certainty. Genuinely, people don't want to avoid, maybe section, I'm not talking about that. Generally, when you look at large companies, MNCs, they don't want to avoid taxes. They want to have certainty of taxes. And if that certainty is not there, they will say, मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ? Yeah. That's a big issue. मुझे, I don't know whether आपको पता होगा कुशल, लेकिन जब ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग इंडिया में इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ, इतना सारा लिटिगेशन हो गया कि इंडिया विच हैज गॉट 2% ऑफ ग्लोबल ट्रेड हैड 91% ऑफ ग्लोबल ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग डिस्प्यूट्स. 2% ऑफ द ट्रेड और 91% ऑफ द ग्लोबल डिस्प्यूट्स केम टू इंडिया. देन ऑफ कोर्स एडवांस प्राइसिंग एग्रीमेंट केम, थिंग्स हैव नाउ सेटल्ड डाउन. बट दैट्स व्हाट आई एम सेइंग, इट्स द ऑफिसर्स, द इंटरप्रिटेशन. अगर आप एक सेंट्रल इंटरप्रिटेशन नहीं दे सकते कि अगर सीबीडीटी कहती है कि जब हम कहते हैं कि ये एक कानून है, अगर किसी को कोई प्रॉब्लम है तो इसका मतलब ये होता है एंड एवरीबडी फॉलोज. आपने सुना होगा कुशल, विदाउट आयोटा ऑफ डाउट, अबाउट द होल कंट्रोवर्सी ऑन मॉरिशस. सो द पॉइंट इज कि अगर आप मॉरिशस से पैसा लेके आते हो तो आपको इंडिया में कैपिटल गेन्स टैक्स नहीं देगा. अब तो टीटी चेंज हो गए, 6-7 साल हो गए, लेकिन पहले ये कानून था कि अगर आप फॉरेन से पैसे लेके आए, आपने मॉरिशस में कंपनी सेटअप कर दी, अपने इंडिया में कैपिटल गेन्स बने, आपको नहीं देना. इफ यू सेटअप अ कंपनी इन मॉरिशस जिसमें आपने यूज अ वर्ड शेल कंपनी, तो ये शेल कंपनी को ट्रीटी बेनिफिट देनी चाहिए, नहीं देनी चाहिए? नाउ लॉजिकली यू शुड नॉट गिव इट, बट इंडिया वांटेड फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट. तो इंडिया ने क्या किया, एक सर्कुलर इश्यू कर दिया कि अगर कोई मॉरिशस की कंपनी है और उसको वहां का ऑफिसर बोलता है कि दिस इज टैक्स रेसिडेंट्स ऑफ मॉरिशस, तो उनको टीटी बेनिफिट हमको देना ही है. मीनिंग बेसिक कि आप आ जाओ, हमको पैसा चाहिए, टैक्स को छोड़ दो. अगर धंधा बनेगा तो पैसा बना, नहीं बना कोई बात नहीं, एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेट. अभी वो ऑफिसर आके बोलता है नहीं, कानून तो ये बोलता है कि आप टीटी अगर आपको चाहिए तो आप सब्सटेंस प्रूव करो, ये प्रूव करो, वो प्रूव करो. आई एम नॉट ऑन व्हाट इज राइट एंड व्हाट इज रॉन्ग. I'm talking about the inconsistency in the policy. आपको नहीं देनी है ट्रीटी, Don't come up with a circular कि हम TT देंगे. You are luring people to say, come to India, use Mauritius. We have no problem with TT. Then the officer does the. So we are looking at things where there is this big gap. अगर ये gap निकल जाती है, so there is one point. Second thing on the tax front which needs to change is the time it takes to resolve a dispute. तो अगर आपने एक रिटर्न फाइल कर दिया तो कुशाल लोड़ा आपने 2 लाख की इनकम कर दी, ऑफिसर बोलता है नहीं 2 लाख नहीं 20 लाख होनी चाहिए. सबसे पहले वो बोलेगा आप 20% टैक्स पे करो, आपके पास फंड्स है नहीं है, फिर आप अपील में जीत गए, ऑफिसर विल गो इन ट्रिब्यूनल. नाउ ऑफ कोर्स देयर आर लिमिट्स ऑन बियॉन्ड व्हिच यू कांट गो टू हाई कोर्ट, बट अदरवाइज इट विल गो टू हाई कोर्ट, सुप्रीम कोर्ट. Now, what is the ratio of success of tax office in litigation? It is less than 20%. 16-17%, which means that in 80% of the cases where the litigation arises, tax office loses in litigation. But just think of our taxpayer. You will find cases after cases. लोग बोलते हैं क्या लगाया आप इतनी बड़ी, आपने हमारी डिमांड इश्यू कर दी. डिमांड इश्यू कर दी, अगर आपने स्टे भी दे दिया, मेरा ट्रांजैक्शन होता है रुक जाएगा, कोई बोलेगा ये इसका वैल्यूएशन में ये कम करो. सो इफ वी रिजॉल्व दिस 2-3 इश्यूज, इफ वी कीप लिटिगेशन टू बेयर मिनिमम, एक्सपीडाइट इट. आज कुशल, इफ यू गेट एन एडिशन, अगर किसी ऑफिसर ने आपके इनकम में एडिशन कर दी, योर फर्स्ट रेमेडी इज टू गो टू से कमिश्नर अपील्स. कमिश्नर अपील्स की अपील आते आते 7 साल 8 साल लग जाते हैं. अरे भैया क्यों? तो ये बात यहां तक पहुंच गई कि किसी ने गुजरात हाईकोर्ट में रिट फाइल कर दी और गुजरात हाईकोर्ट ने ऑर्डर पास किया कि अगर आप, सो कानून यह कहता है कि अगर आप अपील में गए तो द अपील ऑफिसर शुड ट्राई एंड डिस्पोज द मैटर इन 1 ईयर. अगर आप नहीं कर पाते, आपका प्रॉब्लम है, द डिमांड इज परमानेंटली स्टेड अंटिल यू डिस्पोज. अ कोर्ट हैड टू कम. So those are the sort of issues in tax which are becoming more important rather than tax policy. There is nothing fundamentally wrong with the policy. It's more about implementation, litigation management and all the things.
So when you say that policies tax ki barabar hai but implementation is not being done correctly, what do you have to say about the GST thing which is now happening? Although I know that it is indirect tax, but GST में like जैसे बहुत wide variety of rates है, and plus अभी like रिसेंटली बहुत ज्यादा अमेंडमेंट्स वगैरह भी होते हैं जीएसटी में भी, अलग अलग चीजों पे अलग अलग रेट्स वगैरह अप्लाई कर रहे हैं. तो उस पे आपका क्या ओपिनियन है ऑन द इम्प्लीमेंटेशन ऑफ जीएसटी इन इंडिया?
सो अगेन इट्स द सेम थिंग एज इनकम टैक्स एक्ट. सो लेट मी गिव यू सम वेरी कॉन्क्रीट एग्जांपल्स. आप एक अगर कंपनी है, आप ट्रेडिंग कर रहे हैं, व्यापार कर रहे हैं, सो इनकम टैक्स डिपार्टमेंट विल कम एंड से कि आपका जो इनकम टैक्स का टर्नओवर है और जीएसटी का टर्नओवर है या मैच होना चाहिए. ये कभी मैच नहीं हो सकता, क्योंकि अगर आप इंटर ऑफिस ट्रांसफर करते हैं गुड्स को, इट इज लायबल टू जीएसटी, बट फॉर इनकम टैक्स पर्पसेस अनलेस यू सेल टू एन आउटसाइडर इट इज नॉट टर्नओवर. एंड देयरफॉर पीपल नो दिस डिफरेंस. सो जब जीएसटी का रिटर्न फाइल होता है उसमें एक रिकंसिलिएशन लगता है, नोट्स टू अकाउंट्स होती है कि ये इस तरह से है. द ऑफिसर गोज एंड मेक्स एन एडिशन. Now, what happens in GST is the addition is qua the turnover. मान लीजिए आपकी कंपनी है, उसकी 1 करोड़ की टर्नओवर है, आप 2 लाख का प्रॉफिट बनाते हैं. उसमें 1 करोड़ के बजाय जीएसटी का टर्नओवर 1 करोड़ 20 लाख है. ऑफिसर आके बोलते मैं 20 लाख जोड़ देता हूँ और 10 लाख की डिमांड रेज करता हूँ. आपके पास तो पैसे ही नहीं है देने के लिए. आई गिव यू वन एग्जांपल. सेम थिंग, शिपिंग कंपनीज, सेम थिंग. आप एजेंट हैं, प्रिंसिपल ने टैक्स पे किया है, आपने, दिस आर नॉट इश्यूज ऑन विच देयर शुड एवर बी लिटिगेशन, लेकिन चलते रहता है. मेक माई ट्रिप में देयर वाज रेड एंड पीपल वर एक्चुअली इम्प्रिजन्ड. द क्वेश्चन वाज एट व्हाट स्टेज शुड टैक्स बी डिडक्टेड. इफ यू पे अमाउंट टू मेक माई ट्रिप which in turn pays to a hotel and hotel has discharged GST, आपने क्यों नहीं किया? लेकिन टैक्स तो भरा गया है, डिपार्टमेंट इज नॉट देयर, बट यू आर अरेस्टेड, पुट बिहाइंड बार, then you go to a Harish Salve to get a matter argued, you pay millions of rupees of fees, and you say, what am I doing in this country? It's the same issue.
So इसको solve कैसे कर सकते हैं? Like, I mean, I hear you and I think ये बहुत important issues है. But the bigger question is, what is the solution now and how can we solve this?
So I think the key is this approach of central administration has to come in. So अगर आप यूके में है, कंपनी है, तो आपको ऑर्डर आती है, and Mr. Sam Jones has passed an order. It does not pass as Sam Jones. It says Sam Jones by the authority of Commissioner of Income Tax. यहाँ पे it is Mr. ABC who passes the order. Right?
Okay.
Question is, can we have a bit of an approach which results in consistency? Let me tell you, the most complex regulations are US tax regulations. It is a nightmare for people to understand. In fact, like a surgeon, there people specialize in sections. एक बंदा है वो वही सेक्शन करेगा और कोई सेक्शन में ओपिनियन भी नहीं देगा, because it's complex. But the IRS there will come back with position papers quickly on things. This is our position. Right? There is consistency thereafter in implementation. I think that consistency is very much needed.
And what are like some laws in other countries that India can draw inspiration from? You said US में ऐसा है.
Globally, it's see, Kushal, the point is that in most large countries, if you are a large taxpayer, you are respected, you are given privileges. In India, a tax officer regards a large taxpayer with suspicion. कि इसने इतना दिया है और मैं how more can I? So what happens is, and again maybe since you're talking about a mindset issue, so an officer who is doing an assessment will come back and say कि if he is doing an assessment और उसने adjustments नहीं किए, then he has not done his job. That is not his job. His job is to say whether the tax you have paid is fine or not. If you come back and say it's fine, it's perfectly fine. There is a mechanism to monitor. Here, an officer will struggle to find an order. So and so is done, I have verified everything is okay. तो फिर किया क्या तुमने? That's the approach. It's the approach issue.
You also said in one of the previous interviews on TDS कि there are like multiple rates. TDS is very important, you said, but do you need multiple rates like 2%, 5%, 10%? And can we just come back to say like...
Gosh, I didn't realize that you've gone through my earlier
I have like a proper document here. So I wanted to ask on the TDS angle. What's your thought?
Very simple. What happens is that under the Income Tax Act, multiple sections हैं, and उस section के हिसाब से आपको tax काटना है. Now, that's a very important collection mechanism for the government. But if you are deducting tax, so मान लीजिए कुछ आपके पास 6 employees हैं, आपने 6 को पगार दिया, आपका टैक्स काटा. It is not your tax. It is a tax of somebody else, and you are just facilitating, and you are an agent of the government. As the government consensus कि आपने ये जो टैक्स काटा, इस पे आपने इंटरप्रिटेशन किया कि ये हाउस रेंट अलाउंस नहीं टैक्सेबल है और गलत है, एंड आई स्टार्ट प्रोसिक्यूटिंग यू. तो बोलोगे ये मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ यहाँ पे बैठे. So the question, so for example, there's a section under which if you are carrying out any work, you have to deduct 2% tax. If you are rendering services, you have to do 10%. And there's an interpretation issue as to whether something which you are doing is work or is professional services. Now, you have deducted tax. The government can go to that person. Is a trace. Okay. So, the question which we were raising and representing before the Revenue Secretary was that why do you want multiple rates? What is TDS? It is the mechanism for government to get money, and thereafter there is a trace. That person, you can trace him. उसने पूरा पैसे दिए, advance tax दिया, नहीं दिया. TDS is not the final tax. It is only a mechanism for you to collect taxes so that the guy pays the balance tax or comes for a refund. So why do you have multiple rates? Because then there is a controversy, there is a litigation, and the litigation is faced by the person whose income it is not there. It is somebody else's income. You go to the person whose income it is and recover the balance. So the question was, if you have fewer rates, so our proposition basically was to say that there is one rate which is applicable to salary. क्योंकि आप पूरा tax काटोगे, that is one. Second is there's a default rate कि आप lotteries हैं, crypto हैं, negative rate आप highest. बाकी have just one rate. That is
Actually, yeah, I think I resonate because हमारे इसमें मैं हमारे इंडस्ट्री की बात करता हूँ. So in the influencer marketing industry, when a brand pays money to an influencer or to a content creator, there is always an argument कि ये 2% पे डिडक्ट होना चाहिए या 10% पे होना चाहिए. Why? Because अगर हमने कॉन्ट्रैक्ट साइन किया है वो ब्रांड के साथ एंड वी आर डूइंग रेपिटेटिव वर्क विद देम, तो वो कंफ्यूज होते हैं कि ओके फिर वो 2% करना चाहिए, 194C में आ जाएगा. बट अगर कॉन्ट्रैक्ट साइन नहीं किया है तो साइन भी किया बट इट इज अ प्रोफेशनल फी which the brand is giving to the content creator, then they deduct at 10% under 194.
that is exactly what I had in mind when I do 2% versus 10%.
Yeah.
Now the point is that when the person is paying to you, you are supposed to pay full tax.
Yeah.
Your tax liability will be 30%, depending on what your expenditure is.
Yeah.
But that guy will get into a controversy and be prosecuted or penalized to say, why did you not?
Yeah, right. And if he's deducting let's say 2%, then the government will be like कि 10% पे करना चाहिए था, so penalty it's like a shortfall of TDS.
Sir, interest दो आपने कम दिया.
Correct.
मैं क्यों litigate कर रहा हूँ? मेरी थोड़ी income है ये.
Yeah. Fair point. And यही ऐसे ही सिमिलर जैसे TDS का पॉइंट है, ऐसे और इनकम टैक्स एक्ट में आपके हिसाब से और ऐसे कोई 2-3 सेक्शंस है जो बहुत मतलब इट्स लाइक कॉजिंग अ लॉट ऑफ पेन टू द एसएससीज, ये या तो रिमूव होने चाहिए या तो ये थोड़े बेटर हो सकते हैं, कोई एग्जांपल है?
काफी है and I don't know whether this is the right forum Kushal to get into it. So for example, there's an issue that people want to do charity. The laws related to charity have become so complex. अगर आपने charity की उसमें कुछ business आ गई, no, there may be have some people who may have misused and abused charity provisions. But today, for example, if you are training people who are handicapped to manufacture something and that is sold and the money is either paid to them or business income, कितनी percent, 20% ज़्यादा है नहीं है, you got the laws are being created for people who violate, and those people will always find a way to violate it. Okay? Question is, there is a huge percentage of population which is compliant for whom you are making life miserable. So the question is, tax is something that you have to pay to the nation, your contribution to the society. Can it become so cumbersome and costly to do that? Every company has dozens of people. There are companies who have hundreds of people on direct and indirect tax side. Information करो, ये करो, वो करो, फाइल करते रहो.
And I mean, a lot of compliance pain also increases.
Absolutely.
Because of this.
Absolutely. And what has happened again, I spoke to you earlier about faceless assessment. Under faceless assessment, again, for all the right reasons, the government says that you do electronic filing. Right? But there are transactions which are fairly complex. On those transactions, you have to sit and explain. अगर आपने hedging की है, cross border, ये वो, but so many transactions which happen, which are not easy to understand. Right? Even for an auditor, sometimes it becomes difficult to understand. Now, there's an officer asking you to file voluminous data. He is, whether it is possible on a blank screen to explain everything, you will have time. And if he doesn't understand, disallow. So, somewhere along the line, the policies tend to be for all the right reasons, and then the way they degenerate.
The way you said that TDS should also be like consistent and salary के लिए एक होना चाहिए, crypto के लिए एक होना चाहिए, lotteries के लिए एक होना चाहिए. Do you think that we should move to a single rate GST system as well?
So, again, Kushal, there is a need to balance simplicity, tax requirements, and burden on the taxpayer. Now, if you go back and say that the rate of tax on salt and the tax on liquor rate should be the same, who are the consumers and what are you trying to do? So it's very attractive, very, very fashionable to come back and say put only one rate. But medicines deserve a different rate. You will have to give exemptions. Okay? A car has to have a different rate because a single rate prevails in EU, for example. For goods, services, everything. It's a developed country. There are no people starving out there. Here, people can barely afford meals, and you are putting tax on them. Okay? So it is not practical. That's the way I would look at it. Can there be more items which can be brought under common net? Yes, but that's a separate question. To bring a uniform single rate might be difficult, might be easy to comply, but might be really difficult to implement.
And in the sense that now you've practiced as a in taxation, and you've been an expert in tax. In your entire journey, even while working in the previous organizations or now at Dhruva, what has been the most interesting case study or case law with respect to taxation that you have dealt with, without naming the client, of course, and how did you deal with that?
Maybe I can tell you different facets of tax work that you do, which makes you want to go to the office every day, because that's something which is new and interesting, which is happening. Look, I met up with a entrepreneur who's as a listed company manufacturing chemicals and based out of a relatively small place in Gujarat. He came to meet me. He felt he had a major problem and came to meet me. I looked at it, saw it, and I said, this is very simple. There is no issue. You're not violated anything. Very comfortable. Then we got chatting, and as we got chatting, I explained to him that he needed to restructure his shareholding in a particular manner to make it efficient. And we heard and said, yes, it never occurred to me. I said, your company is worth so many 1,000 crores on the listing. How come such a simple thing has not occurred to you? And he told me something, and I'll never forget that. So he said, Dinesh bhai, आप मुझे टैक्स की बात कर रहे हो, मैं केमिकल इंजीनियर हूँ. तो मैं इस गांव में पढ़ता था बारडोली में, और स्कूल में पैंट पहनने के पैसे नहीं थे, चड्डी पहन के जाते थे, इवन दो पैंट वाज अ मैंडेटरी थी. पढ़ाई की, केमिकल इंजीनियरिंग सीख गए, नौकरी की, अभी एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप की. So that's all that I understand. I've never understood financial engineering. Now to you, what may appear to be such a simple thing, that's not what I am all about. And you come back and say, if you can add value to somebody like that, you feel so good. Here is somebody who says, I didn't have money to buy pant to wear in a school, although it was a dress. Okay. And from there, I had another guy, very, very interesting guy, and I won't go into all of it, who was relocating from USA to India and had made substantial money in USA. And why was he relocating? My mom used to be a ghar ghara kaam wali bai, okay? And now she's turning this age, and I want to spend last few years with her. And suddenly sold everything and came down, and what was happening with the tax office anyways is a separate story altogether. But you hear these stories and you say that's what makes it's very one thing about life is to work on large matters. You spoke about Vodafone, and it was a marquee case which I handled as a lead advisor and whatever else, and that's of course very satisfying intellectually. But I can tell you, working with some of the young entrepreneurs, people who have made it difficult, who really have no understanding, and being able to sit with them, help them, mentor them, guide them, the satisfaction that you get that you are contributing to something, nothing can beat that. And that's what you look forward to every single day. You meet somebody who's creating something out of nothing. While he may have come to you for a tax issue or a regulatory issue, you go back and share your entrepreneurship journey, give him or her a few tips on how one can do things. That's the fun of the whole game.
So you had handled the Vodafone case when you were at...
Oh, yes. I
Oh, okay. I didn't know this. Nice. Yeah, that was a very complex case study. I remember in my CA days also when we used to study. So that was a entire case law which was taught to us, and that was one of the most complicated case laws. Hutchison India, Vodafone, Cayman Islands, and all of that. Oh, that is amazing. And just in terms of the taxation policies and mechanisms which are there now, there's also a concept of inheritance tax and wealth tax, which was abolished in India, and a lot of other countries are also levy these kind of taxes. So, इस पे आपका क्या opinion है? This should have been there. This should have been abolished. What's your opinion on that?
There used to be multitude of taxes at some point of time in India, Kushal. There was estate duty. And since you have written about acing CA, I remember that in my CA exams, the only thing I took optional, which I did not attempt at all, was estate duty, because you had to do simultaneous equations and you had to do complex maths to try and solve some of those issues. So we had math, we had estate duty, we had super tax, we had gift tax, we had wealth tax, and thank God over a period of time we abolished. And one of the things that had happened at that point of time, the reason for abolition, was that the cost of collection of these taxes, जो इसमें collection होता था, उससे इसका खर्चा ज्यादा था. And the government came to say this does not make sense. फिर बीच में 2-3 बार गवर्नमेंट ने डायरेक्ट टैक्सेस कोड नया बनाया और उस पर प्रपोजल थी कि वेल्थ टैक्स लगाए, बट दैट नेवर गॉट इम्प्लीमेंटेड. नाउ द क्वेश्चन इज, what is the priority of the country? Tax is one of the mechanisms. I told you, there is an economic policy and tax is a part of it. मैं अपने पार्टनर लोगों को हमेशा समझाता हूँ कि tax is a tail and business is the dog. And a dog can wag the tail, not a tail wagging the dog. So you have to remember, business, finance is more important. Tax is an essential part of it, but not the crux of it. And the challenge which I find is that when you start putting inheritance tax, here is a country which is trying to create wealth. अभी आपने inheritance tax लगाया तो people have to start finding structures, इसको avoid कैसे करे, क्या करे. You know, already many people have put structures into place, whether it is creation of trust, etc., etc. And wherever today there is an inheritance tax, whether it is USA, whether it is some of the Scandinavian countries, Europe, whatever, I don't think the collections have been significant. In fact, I must come back. You when you began this interview, you asked me a question: what are the new opportunities? You will be very surprised if I tell you some of the most frequent assignments we have been getting in the last few months is people from UK wanting to relocate. Okay, because the UK removed the non-dom status.
Meaning?
So there was a law in UK that if you were residing in UK but were not domiciled there, there was a test of domicile, number of years, etc., etc., then you did not pay tax on your overseas income unless it was brought to UK. So I don't know if you remember Akanksha Murthy did not pay any tax on the dividend that she got from Infosys. And it became a controversy for Rishi Sunak that your wife is not paying taxes. But that was a law that if you are not domiciled in UK, and domicile is a defined thing, then on overseas income you don't end up paying tax. That has been removed. As a consequence, your global income, wherever you earn, is now subject to tax at 45% in UK. And the number of people who are relocating from UK is not funny. It is going to impact that economy and the global standing of London. It is that bad a situation. Now, we're talking about inheritance tax, and I'm saying tax is an essential part of a policy. If you come back and say, I want taxes, you will get taxes. But what will be left? Will people be interested in doing business or not? That's the key issue. So, can inheritance tax be introduced? Yes. Should it be introduced? Maybe we still need to mature as a country. Let wealth happen, then inheritances happen. Then you can't take a few examples to say, oh, people have got billions of dollars. That's not representative of what the country is all about. So we had wealth tax, we had gift tax. All of this, if they come, has to come. Then people will have to find structures. It's an It's still time for the country to do that. Let's become third largest economy. Let GDP go up, or per capita GDP go up.
Yeah.
Then the government can start looking at number of these things.
Which are some countries in the world that have the highest tax rates?
So UK, for example, today. But again, that question is a misnomer. Shall I tell you why? UK has a 45% tax, but it also has welfare schemes. Some of the highest tax rates are in the Scandinavian countries, and people are happy to pay because you get free education from the government, free hospitalization, which is the best in the world, all of that. So tax has to be commensurate with what the government is providing to you. Today, in the tariff war, the question is India is charging huge import duty on cars, and the Indian cars are roughly twice as costly as the cars that you'll get in, say, Dubai or in USA. And the government has a policy to say we want to have that so that people who are rich can pay that tax and will collect it, and foreign exchange is preserved and domestic industry is preserved. But after that, do you get roads which you deserve after paying such a lot of taxes, etc.? So when there are countries which charge huge amount of taxes, Europe is among the highest, UK, all of them are very, very high. But they also correspondingly provide you benefits.
Right. At one point, I think, I don't remember which country was there, but there was a 97% tax. I think it was India only back in 1960s, 1970s, where the marginal tax rate was 97%.
If you had a company paid tax, gave you dividend, you paid tax on that, and you had a super profit tax and all of that, ultimately you ended up at almost like 97%. So what would happen? Let me give you an example. You had shares of a company. Let's say there was a 2% wealth tax. Okay. Now a 10 rupee share was trading at 200 rupees. So 2%, 4 rupees. The company is paying you dividend of 10% on 10 rupees. So you get 1 rupee dividend, you pay 4 rupees tax. How do you work that?
Got it. So that's how it amounted to like 97%. Do you think that capital gains tax should be unified across different asset classes, especially given the fact that now it's, let's say, 12.5% on long-term capital gains or 20% on short-term, etc.? What's your view?
No. So a good unified rate is one part, and long-term, short-term is another part. Short-term gains are taxed at a higher rate because they don't aid in capital formation. You have made a quick thing. A short-term capital gain is virtually akin to a business income. Okay? You are trading in something, okay, you held it for a longer time. For long-term so just as we discussed a few minutes back about TVS being rationalized, this was one of the rationalization provisions which was recommended to the government to say that today when you look at capital gains tax, there are different rates across different classes, different rates for resident, different rate for non-resident, different rate for listed, unlisted, and a lot of rationalization has happened. So now today you have a 12.5% uniform rate. So a lot of thing on the rate has already happened. There are a few things outlying, but they are really insignificant.
Awesome. This was super, super insightful. I learned a lot. One last question which I ask all my guests. So if you were in the shoes of Kushal Lodha and if you were interviewing Mr. Dinesh Kanabar, what is one question you would like to ask him towards the end of the interview?
I think the as a chartered accountant, are you constrained because of your training, or are you free because of your training? You yourself, Kushal, went up and said that, look, you have not been trained into media. You have not been trained into communication. Okay? You learned this. And from whatever I have learned or known, you're doing a damn good job of it. No.
Thank you so much.
No. That is because, as I went back and we spoke earlier, analytical thoughts, etc., etc. The question is, how do we train chartered accountants? This is a part of the curriculum. Today, there is a training on audit, law, taxes, all of that. How do you train chartered accountants? As a part of that training, inherent training, to think like entrepreneurs. to think like businessmen, to say what are the opportunities available. How do you change your curriculum to impart some of the soft skills that are needed so much today in today's world? Uh, MBAs have a different skill set compared to chartered accountants, and I'm not comparing which is good or better or not all of that. But clearly, MBAs have been trained in case studies to think differently. The presentation skills are fabulous. How do you impart those skills? And how does the institute today reinvent itself to create a new breed of chartered accountants who are forward looking, future looking, and who can make their mark in the world?
So how do you think ICI can do this? What are the changes in curriculum?
They really need to. They really need to relook at the curriculum. Recently, the ICAI said that they are going to do 3 exams instead of 2, and all of that is very welcome. But is your course material robust enough for today? Are you teaching AI to people? Are you telling people that there are things which you are doing and you are going to become irrelevant if you are doing that? So it's a question of institute having that pragmatism to say what is happening in the world and how do we adapt, and adapt very, very quickly. Articleship is a great way of training. How do we build something into classroom training, case studies, deliberations? Lots can be done out there.
And do you think that AI will replace the jobs of chartered accountants? This is a question I get a lot of times on my email, on my DMs and all. What's your thought?
Kushal, I don't know that I'm competent to answer that, but what I would say is that any job which is low end, repetitive, which does not require cerebral work will be replaced. At Dhruva, we do a lot of work on AI. I would say we are ahead of the curve, probably the way I see it, on AI. But we see significant limitations still in AI. Right? There is no AI which can be today deployed which does not require vetting by a human being. It's incapable, it's hallucinating, it's a long, long way to go. Assuming it is overcome, it will still overtake people who are doing routine, repetitive jobs. I'll give you an example. When India opened up the economy, there were companies, big fours in this country, who would charge $100,000 for preparing a report of Indian market. I know how India middle class, so many people, this, that, whatever. Then that became available on the Google search, okay? And nobody would pay you even $1 for that. Similarly, there are things which are going to be possible to be done by AI, which are routine, regular. Chartered accountants need to move to that level where they are continuously thinking, innovating, solution providing. That's not something which AI, at least in the foreseeable future, is able to get into.
Can you give some examples of AI tools that you are using in your day-to-day work at Dhruva?
So we are in the process of creating our own bot. Working very, very hard at it. We use some of the ready tools where we can access databases, commentaries, etc. to get something quick. We have a very robust knowledge and management solution within the office. So all the work that is done by the whole firm, that knowledge resides there. How do people get access and use AI to access so that you are not reinventing the tool? So we do a number of things there.
ChatGPT is something which you would use highly, I assume.
No, we use our own bot and whatever else we need to.
Is it because of the privacy issue?
No, not only that. We do believe that on a technical subject, your own bot has far better capabilities.
Yeah, actually, you're right, because I think it's a very technical concept, the taxation thing. So relying on a new third-party AI tool, I think that might be a little risky.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But thank you so much once again for doing this. I had a lot of fun, and I am sorry I took a lot of your time, but this was extremely insightful.
Delighted. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, and I hope your viewers enjoyed too.
Absolutely.
Happy to get a feedback.
They are going to love this, and this book is also something which I'm looking forward to. So
I'm going to leave that with you because I don't think it's your subject unless you want to go through it and return it to me. This is
no, of course. I mean, this is something which I wanted to, show to the audience as well. So this is your hobby, right? I mean, the stamps thing. Yeah, that is also something amazing.
It's a study of India's first stamp. So India's first stamp was printed using lithography. So you'd etch on a copper plate and then you would print, and then the plates would get worn out. So the
Yeah.
study of that
So
particular
that's
stuff.
lovely. Thank you so much once again for doing this. I hope I could do justice to your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
अगर आपको ये वीडियो पसंद आया होगा तो आई रिक्वेस्ट यू टू शेयर इट विद ऑल योर फ्रेंड्स एंड सब्सक्राइब टू आवर चैनल सो दैट वी कैन गिव यू मोर वैल्यू एडिटिव कंटेंट इन द शॉर्टेस्ट अमाउंट ऑफ टाइम. हमको ये बताइए कि आपको कौन से काइंड ऑफ गेस्ट चाहिए. हमको ये बताइए कि कौन से क्वेश्चंस मुझे नहीं पूछने चाहिए थे, कौन से क्वेश्चंस मुझे और पूछने चाहिए थे ताकि आपको और ज्यादा वैल्यू मिल सके, और कौन से ऐसे पार्ट्स है जो आपको बिल्कुल पसंद नहीं आए ताकि हम लोग ये पार्ट स्ट्रीम कर सके फ्यूचर एपिसोड्स में. सो थैंक यू सो मच वंस अगेन फॉर वॉचिंग दिस एपिसोड एंड कीप शेयरिंग ऑल आवर एपिसोड्स विद योर फ्रेंड्स एंड कीप गिविंग अस फीडबैक so that we can improve and come up with better quality content.